Okay, pull your pitchforks away. I know, the GameCube games. I'm working on those. But I have this game, and I really want to review it. A lot of people even asked for it. This game is Firepro Wrestling Returns for the PlayStation 2. This game was released in 2005 in Japan, but the US version was never released until 2007. This game was developed and published by Spike. It was eventually published by H-Tech and 505 Games. H-Tech for North America and 505 Games for Europe. I'm guessing H-Tech and 505 Games primarily translated this game from Japanese to English. And thankfully this is English because I played Firepro Wrestling D for the Dreamcast. That game was released in 2001. On the surface, Firepro Wrestling D looks pretty identical to Firepro Wrestling Returns, except it was never translated by an official developer, which is a bit of a shame since this game has a good look and not to mention a pretty damn good roster. And no, I'm not just saying that because Triple H is in it. There are translation scripts and even translation mods they can download online, but ain't nobody got time for that. There are also Firepro Wrestling games for the Game Boy as well, so yeah, the Firepro Wrestling series is pretty popular. In fact, the series go all the way back to the 80s. The very first one being Firepro Wrestling Combination Tag. That game was released on the Japanese PC Engine, which is better known as a TurboGrafx-16 Entertainment Super System in America. Also an interesting fact is that this game was released on the Nintendo Wii's Virtual Console in 2007. That being said, I mainly want to focus specifically on Firepro Wrestling Returns. So what can be said about this game? Well, for starters, this game seems to have really die-hard fans. Fans saying that this game is the best wrestling game of all time. Awesome! So let's check it out. The video intro is pretty cool to look at. It's short and it's not over the top, and it complements the game with what I'd say is the right amount of anticipation. It doesn't use real life footage or even gameplay footage for that matter. It's just shadows and words, which works perfectly well for an intro. The menu has a trippy background and uses fire to choose where you want to go. I like it. But before I get to the gameplay, I want to talk about the edit mode. You can edit pretty much whatever you want. You can edit any wrestler too. You can change their names and their look to whatever you want. Speaking of wrestlers, look at all the names of these athletes. These aren't just for show. These are all playable characters. Look, there are 327 wrestlers from multiple organizations, including the WWE. The WWE wrestlers have different names in this game due to copyright reasons. But like I said before, you can change your names to whatever you want. There are 500 spaces for creative wrestlers too, so you can make as many wrestlers as your heart desired. You can find some WWE wrestlers in the creative wrestler as well. So don't be initially disappointed if you don't see some WWE wrestlers you want at first. They may put them in the creative wrestler for you to make. You can create a ring too, and for what it's worth, it's pretty awesome. I do admit the controls are a bit confusing, but once you get the hang of it, it's pretty customizable. I'm not going to go in depth about how customizable this game is, but it really is amazing. And if you know how to mod your memory card, you can open up a whole new world of customizability, including having WCW and WWE arenas. So really, you can spend much of your time in this game simply creating and modifying, which so many people seem to love. Now for the exhibition. You can see multiple kinds of matches to choose from, and to my surprise, it's not just wrestling. You can choose mixed martial arts, and they don't suck either. They actually feel like an MMA. I thought that was pretty sweet. It's good to see a game with this kind of variety. There's no being overwhelmed by the sheer amount of wrestlers, and getting to anyone is easy, since they are all categorized in their respective organization. Every wrestler that I used also had at least 2 or more kinds of different attires to choose from. You don't have to unlock them or any of that, so that was pretty cool. The entrances look good. A lot of the environment is rendered in 3D graphics, which is actually blended in pretty well, especially for a game that focuses primarily on old 2D graphics. The entrances are nice and short, unlike Firepro Wrestling D, where the entrances took a bloody long time for some superstars. Hell, take a look at Kane. He took forever to come out. I actually thought the game kinda froze, to be honest. In fact, he took so long, his entrance music finished before he even got to the ring. I'm not kidding, it was that long. Thankfully, Firepro Wrestling Returns has rectified this. Now for the gameplay itself. I admit the first time playing this game, I ultimately got my ass kicked, as I found the controls took a little time to get used to. Unlike the SmackDown games where it's just pick up and play. But it's not a bad thing, in fact, the learning curve is kind of a good thing. You see, I actually found taking the time to learn the controls properly was actually a satisfying experience. I felt like I got better and learned how to do something, which in turn feels like an achievement. Just look at the SmackDown games from the very first SmackDown game, right? You can literally pick up the controller and play. It doesn't take much learning. It's like when you tell someone you know how to play a SmackDown game, they'll be like, yeah, so? But when it's something like this, they'll be like, cool. Admittedly, the latest SmackDown games have more complicated controls, but I still found this game harder to learn. I'll explain the controls in a basic way. You see, square does a weak strike and X does a medium strike. And by strike I mean punch and kick. And the circle button plus the D-pad does a strong strike. Pushing circle by itself does another kind of strong strike. And pushing square and X does yet another kind of strong strike. Doing moves like suplex and slams, etc. require you to grapple. The way you do a weak and strong slam is the same way you do a weak and strong strike. Again, when you do the slams, you have to be in a grapple, and the strikes when you're not in a grapple. Now that doesn't sound very difficult, but where the difficulty lies for me was knowing exactly when and where to use the right move, since it can be pretty easy to miss. Now I've only just touched the surface of the controls, but I'm going to digress, since I'm sure you have some understanding by now. The crowd looks pretty good. The music is actually pretty kick-ass. You can actually select what song you want, which is always a plus. Oh yeah, what I must mention is that there are actually 1,694 wrestling moves in this game. That is freaking awesome. And you know, I haven't even talked about the other matches yet, which is what I'm gonna do right now. This game allows you to have a hardcore match. And well, being a Japanese game, I'd be surprised if you couldn't. You can have a ring surrounded by barbed wire with weapons, that's pretty cool. Or you can have the barbed wire outside the ring, which explodes if anybody lands on it. You can even have fluorescent lights on the tables as well, which is pretty cool. Blood is in the game too, and if that's not enough, you can just blow the hell up out of everything. Yeah, even the ref felt that. This game is pretty good when it comes to hardcore stuff, that is for sure. There isn't really a season mode in this game. Well, technically there is, but it's not like the SmackDown games or anything. You can take the role of a promoter and organize an event of matches, and the goal is to make the best show possible. This mode will give you some interesting facts about the organizations, which will help you make a better show. This is kind of like the GM mode from the SmackDown games, or whatever they're called now. And to be honest, people give me crap for not mentioning these kinds of modes. The reason why I don't talk about them is because I just don't really enjoy it that much. I never liked setting up shows for a pay-per-view, and I really have no idea why. I do understand the appeal. It's cool to see something basically come alive, like a wrestler or a show, knowing that you were the one that made it. It just never mixed with me very well. I'm sure there'll be somebody saying that this is the best part of the game. I'm sorry if that offends you, but at least you know this option is there if you want it. So overall, is this game really the best wrestling game of all time? Well, you have hundreds of wrestlers to choose from and over 1,000, well over 1,000 moves too. The gameplay is at a good pace. It doesn't feel slow or too fast. Seeing the graphics and the controls, to be honest, I felt a sense of nostalgia. The gameplay and graphics remind me of some of the old games I used to play as a kid, and how good gameplay was back then, and how gameplay back then can still be better than a lot of recent games put out today. Don't get me wrong, there are a ton of shitty games that had shitty gameplay back then too. Not to mention the sheer customization ability that this game has. Hell, I didn't even show the creative wrestler mode, or even mention the fact that you can adjust and control the way the AI reacts in many kinds of different situations. So in a sense, yeah, this is technically one of the best wrestling games ever. But with that being said, as much as die-hard fans adore this game is simply not made for everybody. The controls have been known to put people off, and honestly, I do kind of see why. It all comes down to the one thing I keep mentioning in almost every single video: personal preference. Personally, I think the game is pretty kick-ass. Yeah, that's been another review of mine. Don't forget to thumbs up, like, and or follow me on Facebook and Twitter. As for the next review, I will finally start getting to those GameCube games. Yeah, bye.